Soniya Agrawal, and welcome to another edition of The Print Soft Cover, where we launch very interesting nonfiction books. And I have with me today Mr. PV Ramana Murthy, who's recently written a very interesting book which talks about the need of humility amongst leaders in the corporate world. And this is the book that we're launching here. It's been published by HarperCollins. And thank you so much, sir, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Soniya. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah. So, a little bit for our viewers about Mr. Murthy. He's a corporate executive who's had over 4 decades of work experience, about 4 decades of work experience in the corporate sector, and he's now currently the founder of his own consulting firm. So, sir, jumping right into the book, talking about it, this is a very interesting concept. Usually, when people talk about leadership, humility is not the first quality or value that people talk about. So, what prompted you to write an entire book on it?
Yeah, actually, there is an answer in your question itself. When we speak about leadership, there is any amount of material on leadership. If you actually Google leadership, you'll get more than 1 million hits on leadership. But when we speak about leadership, humility is not really thought about. It's, leadership is seen as something which is an aggressive form of leadership. It is mostly, if I could use the term alpha male, it's I'm the leader, I have the power, and I need to get the things done, kind of a thing. So over a period of time, while there was research around the humility in leadership in the form of servant leadership or Jim Collins level 5 leadership, unfortunately, over a period of time, leadership is seen more of getting the things done, irrespective of the feelings, emotions of people whom the leader is supposed to lead. This is what prompted me to think about humility in leadership. And in my experience, in my close to 4 decades of experience, corporate experience, I've had the opportunity to work with various leaders, within India and outside India. I've had the great fortune of working with some of the best leaders. So I keenly observe as to, what works for a leader and when would people come together in an organization to collectively make things work and make the organization a high achieving organization. This is where, I thought that humility has a role to play in leadership. And when leaders are humble and when humility drives leadership behaviors and also the thinking, the outcome would be something superlative. It would be much better than what it would be when leaders are not so humble. So this is what made me to think about humility in leadership.
So, sir, in your book, you've interviewed about 30 really influential CEOs across the world, and you also interviewed their staff members, people who know them. So what was the one thing that maybe, really struck as a string of commonality between all these people? And, or maybe something that, really, it may manifest in a different form, but looks the same in all these people with great leadership skills.
Yeah. No, that's a very good question, Sonia. If I'll have to reflect on all the conversations which I have had with several leaders, and also, the people who closely know about them or closely who work with them, one thing which is a commonality, the common thread or common factor is the emotional connect, I would say. Leaders who are driven by, they would have an emotional connect with the people they lead and with the entire organization and beyond the organization, with the family members, the societal stakeholders, etc. And it's not a one-way traffic. It is not emotional connect from leaders to the people. It's also, it's a two-way traffic. It's the emotional connect is from both sides. People also, would have the same kind of emotional connect with such leaders who have humility at their core. So to answer your question, I would say that emotional connect is that thread which connects, which binds the leaders and various stakeholders, which includes the employees, the investor community, the shareholders, the societal people in the society, and everybody. So that's what I would say. The emotional connect is the common factor which I have seen in my interviews.
Right. And, in the book, you also have, in a way, I think I wouldn't be wrong if I said, like, mapped out an entire rubric on what a humble leader looks like, a humble, corporate leader looks like. And it seems like a very complicated rubrics with a lot of, small elements making up for a one big, shining leader, I would say.
Yeah.
So in your experience, since you've been in the industry for so long, how long or what are the things that effectively helps a leader get there? Because all CEOs want to be the best CEO, right? They want their
Yes.
staff to like them. They want to
Yes.
be popular amongst the people that they work within the organization and outside as well, of course. So how do you think, where does the journey start, and how long does it really take to get there? Because nobody becomes a leader within a day. It's not an overnight process.
Yeah, that's again is a very, very interesting question from your side, Sonia. I would look at it from this perspective. When we think of leaders, they are at different stages of their leadership journey. Everybody is not at the same level. Given that scenario, the starting point for any leader is to get himself or herself assessed, to understand where exactly do they stand on the humility high achievement framework. You are referring to my framework in the book, which talks about the attitudinal characteristics, the mindset of leaders, so to say, and the behavioral characteristics, right? I called the attitudinal characteristics Apple framework. And the behavioral characteristics were formed in the way of image framework. When these two frameworks come together, what would happen is that there would be high employee engagement, high experimentation in the organization, and high performance, which means that there would be a culture that would be set in, which is culture of high employee engagement, culture of high experimentation, and culture of high performance. To answer your question, the leaders first need to look into the mirror and understand where do they stand on this framework. Several leaders would be falling anywhere between, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the high, the leaders could be falling between 4, 5, 6. Nobody is a perfect 10. I have not come across any leader who is a perfect 10 on 10. So once a leader understands as to where he or she stands on this scale of humility, high achievement, then the journey starts. How the leader could start the journey? Here, to answer this question, the leaders would be having some of those attributes under the attitudinal characteristics, which I talked about, the image framework. And just for our reflection, image stands for the behavioral characteristics, which is intensity, mindful excellence, ahead of one's time, gratitude, and emotional connect. These are the behavioral characteristics. When we think of the attitudinal characteristics, which are presented in the form of APPLE, APPLE for the purpose of ease of remembrance. So APPLE stands for appreciative mindset and positive possibilities, path showing, light-heartedness, and evolutionary frame of mind. A long answer to your short question, but this is where leaders need to understand as to where am I falling short, what are my strengths, and how would I make sure that on this humility high achievement scale, the framework, which are the things which I need to bridge? Where do I need to develop myself is the mindset of the leaders. And one important thing here, only when leaders want to make a change, this is possible.
Yeah,
when leaders
exactly.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
you say that a leader needs to take a step back and think, am I being a team player or trying to co-create? That obviously needs a higher sense of awareness to even take that step back and think that, am I doing this, to reevaluate their own actions, right?
Yes, 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 absolutely. This is where, you touched upon a very interesting point. It's to enable leaders to have that kind of self-reflection or the self-awareness among the leaders. It's, they need some help. I talked about one of the experiments which we did within Indian hotels, right? When we did our general manager development program, it's, Taj general managers are best in class. They are the best. They have a number of years of experience, and they have seen several situations in terms of their own jobs. And we wanted to break this mindset. I'm the best. Nobody else could do better than me. This is where, we took them this small restaurant in Singapore. The program happened in Singapore, the second session, to a restaurant called Knox Dine in the Dark. It's a very interesting experiment. We did not tell them where we were taking them for dinner that day evening. We all went there, and the small restaurant was, completely served by people visually challenged. In a dark room where nobody could see anything, people totally challenged in terms of their the visual ability. They would serve three-course meal. And all our 30 general managers, when they had this three-course meal, drinks and dinner, they were spellbound. They didn't understand as to how anybody could do such an impeccable job. Next day, when we had these conversations in the classroom, they had no words to explain or describe their feelings and emotions. So this is where, challenging their thought process that I am very good at what I am doing, I am the best in class, is what needs to be challenged. This is where a coach or a trained facilitator could step in to bring in that kind of a change among these leaders. That's where, the emotion, the attitudinal change would start kicking in.
Right. This, really brings to mind two things to me. And this is something I feel very contemporary, very modern day. One is people talking about now it's become a, very talked about phrase, the toxic positivity that we see on LinkedIn, where everybody is just trying to be like promoting the hustle culture. And then there are CEOs writing about how young employees should work 18 hours a day. This is the time to, really hustle and do the job right, get things done. And this is when you earn, and, the whole live fast, work hard life, which CEOs are promoting. I mean, this has been drawing a lot of flack as well on social media, and I will not name the CEO, but I know you're aware of what I'm talking about. What is your idea? How do you see this situation playing out in an organization where the leader is very openly promoting a very high stress environment in terms of work and poor work-life balance?
It's neither good for the people who are subjected to such kind of work environment, nor good for the leaders, right? Overall, it's not at all good for the organization. Wherever it's happening, I think that, it needs to be corrected. It can't be, there is nothing like positive toxicity. There is nothing like, positive toxicity. And leaders need to understand that, it's not a unidimensional game. Unfortunately, leaders fall into this trap of achieving higher goals, higher objectives. And what is driving them to do that? For many of the leaders, I would say, not everybody, for many of the leaders, what is driving them is the greed. And I touched upon those aspects, with evidence, the greed of achieving more, that gaining more name and fame for myself. Leadership is all about leading others. It's not about I, me, myself. It is about others. As a leader, I need to look at the people whom I am leading. And if such people are stressed out, and if such people don't have the work-life balance, and if those people are stifled, and if there is things like, the resignations or high stress environment which is being created, the leaders need to correct their approach. That's not the right kind of leadership approach. This is where in my book I talked about command and empower. Command and empower is a synonym which I use for humble leadership. It's, as a leader, you need to set the direction where the organization needs to go, and then empower the people to take it there. And the leader should never hesitate to fold his or her pant sleeves and then get into the work and then work along with the people.
There's one part where you talk about how, previously the idea of leadership was seen as somebody who's a go-getter, who very aggressively aims to work towards the goal that they want to achieve, and then take the organization and people with them. But then you mentioned that over the years, researchers and a lot of other people in the fraternity started realizing that the need for a humble leadership is something that is required. So according to your research, your understanding, of course, your real life observations, when did you think that shift started happening, that people in the corporate world started realizing that there is a need for a more humane way of leading people, of leading organizations?
Yeah, that's a good question. See, it's like this. Let's recollect Robert Greenfield's servant leadership model. Robert Greenfield, he himself was a corporate executive who talked about humble leadership, or servant leadership rather. And he talked about it in 1960s. I think if I remember right, in 1961, he talked about servant leadership. And that resonated very well with many corporates. Having said that, the servant leadership model, it was a sort of a theoretical proposition rather than something which is backed by absolute research. And very recently, we all heard about the level 5 leadership by Jim Collins. It has become very popular. Jim Collins' level 5 leadership became extremely popular. And Jim Collins, when he wrote this book, Good to Great, he talked about level 5 leadership. He said, leaders who have humility and professional will to achieve, they are level 5 leaders. While it's a great proposition, which actually fits into what I am also talking about, Jim Collins himself admitted, or he wrote a paper which got published in Harvard Business Review, wherein he said that he never got into the details of humility in leadership. He said that we just stumbled upon when we were doing research of good to great organizations. He was talking about organizations moving from good to great in terms of the shareholder return. He said, we stumbled upon this humility and we did not go into the details of researching more into this humility in leadership. So this happened in bits and pieces. It's Robert Greenleaf speaking about servant leadership, Jim Collins speaking about level 5 leadership, and previously to that, the managerial grid. Blake and Mountain talked about managerial grid. People on one axis and profits on other axis. They said that 9x9 leaders who put focus both on profits as well as people, they are the best leaders kind of a proposition. Again, managerial grid by Blake and Mountain was a theoretical construct. It was a theoretical construct, and it was not a research-based proposition where something would come out. And also, it does not really talk about what kind of attitudinal characteristics or behavioral characteristics the leaders need to imbibe to have this humility in leadership. So to answer your question, I would say that it happened in bits, and this shift happened in bits and pieces. It progressed to some extent when Robert Greenleaf talked about it. And the phrase of level 5 leadership caught attention of corporate leadership and the world at large. But there was no collective effort to bring in humility in leadership in the organizational frameworks. This is where I believe that, my research I have been researching this subject for quite some time. I would have spent all my corporate life observing, at least, if it is not a formal research, observing leadership behaviors as to what drives leadership behaviors and why would they do what they do. Kind of a thing, I've been observing throughout my career. And I talked about it in my book as well. You would have seen that. So this is what I would say. So there is a need for driving humility in leadership at this point in time when the whole world is undergoing a major change.
Right. Sir, this brings me to my next question, actually. There has been a huge stress in the corporate world right now with reference to layoffs. And you have also spoken to CEOs who mentioned that, even when they've had to shut down factories, they were able to connect with their staff in such a manner, in such a fashion that the employees gave the then manager a farewell.
Absolutely.
But right now what we're seeing is, CEOs sending emails to their employees at ungodly hours when they're in different states of being and, facing extreme stress because of being laid off in such a inhumane. It lacks such an emotional connect with the employee, right? When you read your this thing over an email, but then they also write that they're really apologetic. And so where do you think this needs to, where would be a middle ground? Because this seems like a very dry approach of doing the same thing. But then at the same time, you've met people who've done it in a fashion where it was so warm, so compassionate that, it really brings out the true, builds on the character of, the leader. So.
Yeah, no, I think that, to answer your question, I would answer this in two phases. I would look at it from two different perspectives rather. One is that, when we want to build a sustainable organization, which is going to exist for a long time to come, taking everybody along with us is the right approach. Having said that, there would be occasions where, there is a need for businesses to reduce the number of people or to take certain tough decisions, hard decisions, which are inevitable, which means that what you need to, as a general principle, you need to take people along with you to build a sustainable organization. So no short-term decisions would really result in building a long-term sustainable organization. I came across this news item recently saying that we are laying off people because that was a wrong decision to hire in the first place. Wrong decision to hire in the first place. It means that, the person who took that decision, the CEO himself, should say that I own the responsibility and I'm stepping down. You take a wrong decision to hire people and now you're laying off and apologizing in a superficial manner. That's not building a long-term sustainable organization from my perspective. The best of organizations would never do such things. The second question, when there is an inevitable situation where you have to do certain tough things, take certain tough decisions, this is where, it is not. Vinita Bali spoke about her experiences. Vinita Bali was the CEO of Britannia in the past, and she worked for several global organizations in very senior roles as the CEO. And what she said was that, you need to remember that when you are taking these tough decisions, there is a family behind this person. And you are talking about the career, the life of this person. And this is where, you need to be extra generous, extra kind. Organizations have the power. It's not just being generous in terms of providing the financial stability. It's also ensuring that the person moves on seamlessly by getting into another job or starting his or her own business. Can we show that kind of an empathy is what the organizations and the leaders in those organizations need to ask themselves. I remember one example here. Several years back, when Tata Steel laid off or retrenched people from the Jamshedpur plant, they ensured that all these employees who lost their jobs would get their salaries till their age of retirement. I would call it as, thinking about the families and the ecosystem, and, looking at the entire situation with empathy and taking those decisions. The Tata Group is what it is today because of all such decisions. So this is where, I would say that I wouldn't really subscribe to the way of, I hire today and fire tomorrow kind of a situation which is taking place. It's unfortunate. It's not long-term and it's not sustainable.
Right. So I think this has been a very interesting conversation, and this is going to be my last question to you. And we have a lot of young viewers, a lot of students who are, on the brink of starting out on their own in their professional career. And I'm hoping and praying that the country needs them. A lot of them turn out to be successful startup founders, owners, and CEOs. I want you to, highlight what are the key learnings, key takeaways that they will find in this book when they, get this book and read it.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting question. Actually, yesterday or day before, one of those young students, Palak Khanna, she's studying at Delhi University. She read the book and she posted something on LinkedIn. I thought that, my efforts, the efforts which I had put in to write this book have been fulfilled. And I read that post. To answer your question, Soniya, I think I would look at it from this perspective that young entrepreneurs or the people who are getting into the startups or into the corporate life, one is that they could learn the leadership, the nuances of leadership. What is right kind of leadership, right? Like I said earlier, leadership is all about leading others. So that means that there is humility already ingrained in it. Humility is putting others ahead of yourself, and leadership is all about leading others. There is humility already ingrained in it. That's what Dr. Ram Charan also said it in the book. That's one thing they could learn. The second thing they could learn as to how to cultivate the mindset of leading the people in the right manner. What attributes do they need to cultivate? Attributes like purpose. There is a section on purpose, curiosity, co-creation, or integrative emotion, right? Looking at opportunities in adversity. How would I build that kind of a mindset is the second thing that would happen. The third thing is, how would I build the right kind of behaviors? See, behaviors are a fallout of my thinking, the mindset. So how would I build the mindset and how would I exhibit the right kind of behaviors is the third thing the youngsters can really learn from this book. And also, because of the discussion around neurosciences in the book, they would understand as to, under certain stressful situations, how could they hold them back and put the focus on other people so that the best could be achieved. That is the third thing they would learn. And the fourth thing is that, they could build several other humble leaders because of their way of leadership approach. It's not just learning for themselves, so they also would be developing several other leaders for the world. And I think that, these are some of the takeaways from the book, I would say. And also, the fifth thing I would say that they could, if they get into a research mode, there is a lot of research that has been mentioned, of course, in an anecdotal and in a conversational way, so that they will not get bored. They could research further and further build on this framework of the humility in leadership. I think that, these are the 4 or 5 big takeaways for those young entrepreneurs who would like to start their own businesses and become leaders for the future. This is how I would look at it, Soniya.
I would like to add that for me as well, it gave me a lot of insight on, really how to even build my own conduct in a workplace. So that really, I feel like this book is for everybody, not just for, people in positions of power, because it's also about giving yourself that power to, build yourself as a leader and be able to lead wherever you're working and whatever position you are in. So that was a very, very insightful conversation. I'm so glad that, I got the opportunity to read the book. Thank you so much, sir, for joining
Thank you
us
very
at
much.
ThePrint.
Thank you very much for this conversation, and special thanks to you for reading the book. You have made my day with your final comments, Sonia. Thank you so very much.
Thank
Really
you so much.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.